Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. Nancy and Ronald Reagan's relationship is a classic love story. The President and First Lady's romance endured Hollywood, politics and personal tragedies. What began as a meeting between two movie stars became a real-life love story worthy of their own Hollywood movie. They were two famous figures, and even from the beginning their relationship was played out on a very public stage. First, they were a well-known Hollywood couple, and in a world where romance often cannot survive the attention or temptations that are part of the lifestyle, theirs thrived. Why was Ronald Reagan and Nancy's love the greatest in Hollywood history? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Ronald Reagan, Life Beyond Presidency. Ronald and Nancy Reagan's timeless love story. Romeo had his Juliet, Antony had his Cleopatra, Prince Edward had his Wallis, and Ronald Reagan had his beloved Nancy. Charlton Heston once said theirs was probably the greatest love affair in the history of the American presidency. The love story of Nancy and Ronald Reagan is sweeping, swooning and familiar to many, having been documented in letters from the former president and quotes from some of their most famous friends. Their dysfunctional family life was the collateral heartbreak that accompanied the Reagans' epic love. What the public saw was a couple intensely devoted to one another. They were always holding hands. Ronald Reagan visibly lit up when Nancy entered the room. Their devotion to each other seemed at times too good to be true, and some along the way would doubt their sincerity, but there was nothing disingenuous about the Reagans and their obvious affection for one another. Theirs was a genuine love affair. They never took each other for granted, and it has been said that they never stopped courting. Their love would endure beyond the marquee lights and names of old Hollywood, strengthening across decades of public service that would culminate in a two-term tenure in the White House. As a couple, Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan would become the epitome of political glamour and private perseverance, their deep and abiding love enduring his presidential turmoil and her anguish of caring for a partner stricken with Alzheimer's disease. Ronald Wilson Reagan, the son of Jack and Nellie Reagan, was born in a small apartment above the Pitney General Store on February 6, 1911, in Tampico, Illinois. His family, which included older brother Neil, moved to a succession of Illinois towns as his salesman father searched for a well-paying job. In 1920, the Reagans settled in Dixon. Jack Reagan was a gregarious man with a grade school education who made his way as a salesman, usually of shoes. He was a dreamer and also an alcoholic. Years later, Ronald Reagan recalled the searing experiences of being the child of an alcoholic father, including an incident where he dragged a passed-out Jack Reagan into the house from the snow. As a boy, Reagan's life was filled with scrapes and adventures. He once narrowly escaped death while playing under a train that suddenly began moving. Reagan graduated from Dixon High School in 1928, where he played on the football and basketball teams, became president of the student body, acted in school plays and wrote for the yearbook. Reagan, an accomplished swimmer since early boyhood, worked 6 summers as a lifeguard in Lowell Park in Dixon on the treacherous Rock River. According to newspaper reports of the time and later research, he saved 77 people from drowning. Reagan enrolled in 1928 at Eureka College. He majored in economics but was an indifferent student, graduating with a C average in 1932. After graduation, Reagan landed a job as a radio sportscaster at WOC in Davenport, Iowa, for $10 per game, and transportation expenses. His lively imagination and resonant radio voice compensated for his inexperience in radio. Standing 6 foot 1 inch tall with wavy brown hair, blue eyes and an inviting broadcaster's voice, Reagan possessed many attributes that portended a successful movie career. Moreover, he had enjoyed acting since his teenage years. In 1937 he went to California to cover the spring training of the Chicago Cubs. and to meet a Hollywood agent. By chance, Warner Brothers was seeking a new actor to replace a promising young star who had died in a car accident, and Reagan vaguely resembled him. He took a screen test for Warner Brothers, and the studio immediately offered him a then munificent $200 a week contract. As a Hollywood movie actor from 1937 to 1957, Reagan appeared in 52 films. He was a competent actor who pleased directors because he was punctual and quickly memorized his lines. He did his best work in light comedies and action movies, and self-deprecatingly called himself the Errol Flynn of the Bees, referring to the low-budget films that were big money-makers for Warner Brothers and other studios. Reagan absorbed the craft of filmmaking, and especially the art of staging a scene effectively. It was a skill that he used repeatedly during his political career. Hollywood changed Ronald Reagan's world, on and off screen. By now he was a Hollywood star. He had a luxury love shack, a Los Angeles home where he bedded more than 50 of Hollywood's leading ladies, including Marilyn Monroe. He was accompanied by his neighbour Errol Flynn, who once boasted that he spent 12,000 to 14,000 nights having sex. During his time as a young B-movie Hollywood actor, Reagan courted screen sirens including Doris Day, Joan Blondell and Lana Turner at the 3-bedroom bungalow in the grounds of the Garden of Allah Hotel in Hollywood. The dates facilitated by Warner Brothers, which set him with actresses to promote both their respective careers, nearly all of them spoke fondly of Reagan. Even if they did not share his right-wing politics, they felt he was a nice guy. But he suffered from what he jokingly referred to as leading ladyitis. In 1940, Reagan married actress Jane Wyman, but he was not faithful to her, and he embarked on an affair with the star of The Oomph Girl, Ann Sheridan. Jane and Ronald were promoted by Hollywood as the ideal couple, but it also claims that Jane was also being unfaithful and was sleeping with actor Lou Ayres, Ginger Rogers' ex, while filming the Oscar-winning Johnny Belinda. They had 2 children, although one of them died. When their marriage fell apart in 1948, he became involved with a young Marilyn Monroe. According to Phil Carlson, a director who introduced them, Reagan described her as sensational, to which she replied, "I'm even more sensational when you get to know me." Ronald Reagan started off as more of a playboy, married once and spending much of his time as an actor in Hollywood cavorting with young starlets. Reagan was considering marrying Doris Day, but instead married another actress, the future First Lady, Nancy Davis. During their 52 years of marriage, Nancy and Ronald Reagan's devotion to one another was undeniable. They met where love stories are made, Hollywood. The pair seemed inseparable at times, Mrs. Reagan giving her husband an adoring look that became known to the country as the gaze. Christened Anne Frances, Mrs. Reagan was quickly nicknamed Nancy by her mother and used that name throughout her life. Her father, Kenneth Robbins, a salesman, and her mother, Edith Luckett Robbins, an actress, separated when Nancy was very young. Edith immediately resumed her acting career and began travelling a great deal, leaving Nancy in Bethesda, Maryland, where she was raised by Edith's sister and brother-in-law. Nancy saw little of her mother over the next 5 years and had no contact with her father. Her parents divorced in 1928. In 1929, when her mother married Loyal Davis, a wealthy Chicago neurosurgeon, Nancy went to live with the couple. Davis eventually adopted her, and she assumed his last name. After graduation from the Chicago Latin School for Girls, she enrolled at Smith College in Massachusetts and majored in drama. Her mother's theatre friends often visited the Davis household in Chicago, fueling Nancy's interest in the stage. After graduation in 1943 and a brief stint working at a department store in Chicago, she turned to acting. She began her career posing for Cheesecake in a failed attempt by the studio to turn her into a sex symbol. Her mother's contacts helped her obtain a job with a touring company and then a role on Broadway. By 1949 she was working in Hollywood, and she eventually made 11 movies, including East Side, West Side, Shadow on the Wall, and Hellcats of the Navy, in which she starred with Ronald Reagan. Though they met as Hollywood actors, there was nothing manufactured about the President Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan's love. When the Reagans met in 1949, they were both Hollywood actors. The future president was newly divorced and the president of the Screen Actors Guild. Nancy reached out to him because an actress with her name had been blacklisted amid the McCarthy era, and it was impacting her ability to find work in the industry. She sought the help of the president of the Screen Actors Guild, Ronald Reagan, for help. In a story varnished into law by the Reagans, the meeting soon led to romance. Their romance, which would span more than half a century, was captured by decades of love letters written by Ronald. "My darling, I love you so very much," the president wrote to his wife on March 20th, 1955. "I don't even mind that life made me wait so long to find you. The waiting only made the feeling sweeter." Nancy dated Clark Gable and Robert Stack before marrying Reagan in 1952. Though they both spoke of having an intense spark when they first met, Reagan would not pop the question for 3 years. According to Nancy, in the years preceding their marriage, Ronald had felt lost, and that life as one of Hollywood's most eligible bachelors had been for her new husband like wandering in the dark. From the beginning it was clear that the Reagans were absolutely enamoured with one another. "My life didn't really begin until I met Ronnie," Nancy wrote in her memoirs. In 1952 Reagan proposed with a simple "let's get married," to which she replied, "Let's." They were married at Little Brown Church in LA that same year on March 4th, and 7 months after, their first child was born. From there their American love story played out like a film they might have once auditioned for, and after Reagan became president in 1981, their relationship began to play out in public. She was Ronnie's right hand in all matters of work and in life, and he was her doting, adoring husband. The Reagans' devotion to one another was so fierce their children complained they felt like outsiders in their own family. In 1957 the couple appeared together in Hellcats of the Navy, but after their son Ron was born the following year, Nancy left acting to become a full-time wife and mother. Throughout his life, Ronald displayed a strong interest in politics. Reagan's national political outlook was shaped by his parents, both Democrats, and especially by the onslaught of the Great Depression. As president of the Screen Actors Guild, Reagan became embroiled in disputes over the issue of communism in the film industry. His political views shifted from liberal to conservative. He toured the country as a television host, becoming a spokesman for conservatism. Meanwhile, her husband's political career took off and he became governor of California in 1967, a position he held until 1975. In 1980 he became president, serving for 2 terms. For her part, Nancy embraced the role of governor's wife and later First Lady. Thought of as America's first couple, the Reagans appeared to embody traditional American values. Their appeal reflected America's love affair with movies and the actors in them. Americans ate up images of Ronald and Nancy's public expressions of sincere devotion, and they were often photographed together on their ranch in California or dancing in each other's arms at state functions. Longtime aide Michael Deaver once said, "Without Nancy, there would have been no Governor Reagan, no President Reagan." USA Today's Owen Ullman said, "She was his only close confidant and friend, and his #1 advisor. In retrospect, I must say she served him, and the country, very well." Nancy decided to become her husband's devoted caretaker after he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. In 1994, Ronald Reagan wrote a letter to the American people to say he was withdrawing from public life. Finally, she had her beloved Ronnie all to herself. The only thing that could separate them was his death in 2004. It was the greatest tragedy of her life. He called her Mommy and penned a lifetime of gushing love notes. She saved these letters, published them as a book, and found them a comfort when he could no longer remember her. At the president's funeral in June 2004, the world watched the tearful widow lean over his coffin to say farewell. It's impossible to imagine Ronald Reagan being elected president without Nancy. She was everything that he was not, and he relied on her for pretty much everything. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the relationship of Ronald Reagan and Nancy? Their love seemed timeless and magical.